Hello everyone and good evening. My name's Don Arleth and welcome to World News Tonight, coming to you live from Warsaw here on TVP World. Poland, France, the United Kingdom, Germany and Italy. These are the countries that spend the most on defense in Europe. We will stop Putin, say the defense ministers of these 5 countries who have just met in Berlin and announced closer cooperations. We'll get more on that in just a minute, but first up, let's start with the headlines. Deadly plane crash in Vilnius. Concerns are growing that it could be a hybrid attack. In Romania, a presidential election upset in the first round, with parliamentary elections just around the corner. And Georgian Dream holds its first parliamentary session, defying protesters and boycotting opposition. European defense ministers from Poland, Germany, France, Italy, and the UK have launched a new defense cooperation format. The group of 5, announced just over an hour ago in Berlin, consists of Europe's 5 largest defense spenders. The ministers spoke of taking over responsibility for Europe's defenses and about stepping up support for Kyiv. Our correspondent, Mark Steele, is in Berlin and has attended the meeting. Good evening, Marek. Now, can you tell us exactly what were said? What are all the details of what was said at the meetings today?
Good evening. Well, it seems that it is a breakthrough meeting here in Berlin today, held between defense ministers of Europe's 5 largest nations. The main message of this meeting here actually is that Europe is taking responsibility for its own defenses. That's what the ministers said here today. They also said that they would be taking on the role as Ukraine's, as Kyiv's biggest supporter. Boris Pistorius actually explicitly, the German defense minister, said that this push is caused because of the U.S. election that took place this month. So because of the election there, because of the uncertainty following the change of administration, which will take place in January, Europe has to take its defenses into its own hands. So as you've said, a new format has been announced, a group of 5. So these are the 5 biggest defense spenders here within NATO in Europe. So this is the United Kingdom, this is Germany, France, Italy, and Poland. Poland, of course, on the eastern flank. Represented here, who represented Poland was Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, the Polish defense minister. Of course, there was Sébastien Lecornu from France, the Undersecretary of Defense from Italy, Isabella Rauti, and John Healey from the United Kingdom. Boris Pistorius said that we are the ones that have the largest defense spending, and what was reiterated here that 2/3 of the money being spent on defense within NATO, within Europe, was from these 5 countries, and that they would have its last word when it comes to defense. The leaders here spoke about cooperation when it comes to the defense industry. They spoke about developing common weapons, long-range missiles, for instance, defensive projects. But they also said that they would double the support being provided to Kyiv. Now let's take a listen to what some of the ministers gathered here today in Berlin, the minister from Germany and the United Kingdom, said about this.
I'm very happy that we are getting together here today in this group of 5, E5 meeting. So it's 5 representatives from Europe that are decisive in developing ideas in order to increasing Europe's willingness to conduct defense. We are the ones that have the largest defense spending in Europe, and we had a very open and frank discussion, one that was necessary.
I think the fact that we've come together as the E5 very clearly signals that we will stand unified and ready to protect our continent from aggressors. We will stand firm in the face of Putin's threats, and that together we will be ready to deter any expansion of Russian aggression.
The ministers gathered here in Berlin spoke about defense spending. While countries like Poland spend a big share of their GDP on defense, it was the UK that said today that it would spend 2.5% of its GDP. France said it would comply with the NATO 2% threshold. But leaders gathered here spoke about, an event that took place in Lithuania this morning. As we know, a cargo plane crashed there, leaving 1 person dead and 3 injured. And there are fears that this was another hybrid operation by the Russian Federation. I asked Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, the Polish defense minister, about this. Let's take a listen.
A full investigation into the crash must take place, and it will take time. We are in constant contact with our partners in Lithuania, within NATO and the EU. This will definitely be the subject of an extensive investigation. Any connection between this crash and any possible influence of a foreign country is the most pressing matter to investigate here. We will support our Lithuanian friends in these efforts. Regardless of what happened in Vilnius today, all of our countries are under constant hybrid attack.
To shortly sum up, this meeting was about taking on the responsibility of Europe's defense by the five biggest nations of Europe, the five nations that spend the most on GDP, but also providing so much support to Kyiv that Ukraine is able to prevail. They also announced another meeting in this format, the Group of Five, and it will take place in Poland next year. Back to you.
Okay, Marek Steele reporting there from Berlin. Thanks for your report. Now let's move on to the DHL cargo plane, which crashed near Vilnius airport on Monday morning, killing one crew member and injuring three. An investigation into the accident is underway, and there are growing concerns that this could be an act of hybrid warfare. Our reporter, Karolina Stoltzman, has more.
What was meant to be a routine morning at Vilnius airport suddenly turned deadly. The plane was supposed to land at Vilnius airport, but a few kilometers before reaching the airport, it crashed and slid for several hundred meters. The debris damaged a residential building, and 12 people were evacuated. An investigation into the causes of the crash was launched right away.
It can be either a technical failure or a human error.
The Lithuanian president visited the crash site with the German ambassador. The plane crash has brought renewed attention to an incident in July this year when an object caught fire at the Leipzig DHL logistics center, a connection noted by the head of Germany's Federal Domestic Intelligence Agency.
If it had exploded on board during the flight, it would have crashed.
Local authorities are cautious about suspecting a terrorist attack, but they remain alert, especially to Moscow's activities.
We see Russia as becoming more aggressive. As you know, our international partners are also publicly talking about dangers. Sabotage cases are increasing, as is the threat of terrorism. We cannot rule out this version.
Despite the suspected connection and sparked concern over terrorism threats, so far there is no proof to support this narrative.
I can say that there are no signs of bullets, no facts suggesting sabotage or an act of terrorism. In simple terms, there was some kind of disturbance or influence on the plane.
Experts say it is unlikely that such an experienced crew would make a mistake during a routine landing.
This plane fell with no reaction from the crew. It is entirely possible that there was a small explosive on board that led to the destruction of the control system, leaving the crew with no chance at all of saving the plane.
For now, what really happened remains a mystery.
The data from the crash will most likely be available, but it will take at least a couple of days, maybe even up to 2 weeks, before we see the transcript from the flight recorders.
Lithuanian authorities have repeatedly called to stop spreading terror panic as the world awaits the result of the investigation.
And now let's go to our correspondent who's at the scene of the crash in Vilnius, Yevgeny Rusakov. Good evening, Yevgeny. So can you tell us what has been confirmed concerning this crash and how has this incident unfolded this morning?
Yeah, hello, Don. Nice to hear you. Unfortunately, I cannot see you, but nice to hear you, as I said. Well, from what we know, it's 13 people that lived in this house, not 12, as confirmed previously, but 13 people were evacuated. They are all accommodated in the hotel, and it was all done by the Vilnius municipality. Regarding the casualties, so one person confirmed dead. 3 people with injuries. One is with severe injuries, multiple injuries. That's a Spanish citizen of Spain. Well, the one that the pilot that feels like the best. In his best shape is Lithuanian, 34-year-old Lithuanian who managed to escape from the plane on his own, and he managed to give some info, which which unfortunately is not, well, to a wide public. It's not widespread, so there's nothing much to be said regarding what he said about the tragedy.
Okay, Evgeny Rusakov reporting for us there from the scene of the crash. Thank you very much for that report, and we'll be checking in with you in the upcoming days. Thank you. In Romania, the independent far-right candidate, Călin Georgescu, has won the first round of the presidential elections. Fairly unknown in mainstream politics, but with a strong presence on TikTok, Georgescu came in far ahead of the projected frontrunners, including the incumbent Prime Minister, Marcel Ciolacu, and George Simion, the leader of the hard-right AUR party. Now in a runoff that could change the course of the country's political leanings, he will face off against Alina Lasconi of the center-right Save Romania Union. Pavel Trzaskowski has more.
This is Izovrani, a little village an hour's drive north of Bucharest. Home to no more than 700 people, it's also where the offices of the winner of the first round of Romania's presidential elections are located. Călin Georgescu, once a member of the hard-right populist AUR party, he left it 2 years ago when a senior party members said his pro-Russian anti-NATO stance was damaging the party's image.
At this moment, my dears, we are writing history, like I promised. As of today, Romania is led again by God, and we, people, have a power that should be used with wisdom.
Georgescu went on to run independently. He remained a relatively obscure candidate, with some polls in October placing his support at less than 1%.
Unfortunately, I don't really know him, but maybe in the runoff we'll find out more about him.
But on Sunday, the underdog came out victorious, garnering 23% of the vote, a political plot twist not seen in modern Romanian politics.
It's a surprise because from a rational perspective it's normal to look at the polls, and it's also normal not to expect big swings from polls a few days before elections.
Experts attribute this big swing in support to Georgescu's intense online campaign.
Practically, he is a candidate who was being created by social media, mainly by TikTok, with a huge increase in his visibility during the last 2 weeks.
Georgescu once called NATO's base in Romania a shame of diplomacy. He is also thought to be Eurosceptic.
He is a politician with a pro-Russian vision. He considers that Romania has to have a relationship not only with the US but also with China and Russia.
In the runoff, Georgescu will face Elena Lasconi, a journalist turned politician who, in the final stretch, pulled ahead of incumbent Prime Minister Marcel Ciolacu of Romania's Social Democrats. Lasconi, head of the centre-right Save Romania Union, is seen as a reformist and an advocate for continuing support for Ukraine, but lacking experience in high-level politics.
She is a freshman to this competition. She's new. She is known only for a couple of months. She's a mayor of a relatively small city in Romania. She has done an outstanding job as a mayor there, so the reputation sort of, went on.
In Romania, the president has control over defense spending and partial responsibility for the country's foreign policy. The choice Romanians make in December 8th's presidential runoff will therefore shape the country's stance towards NATO, Ukraine and Russia.
And nobody really knows how that's gonna go. Călin Georgescu, the guy who is number one now in the first round, he does not have a political party behind. I just found out a couple of hours ago that he registered a political party and he tends to come up in front of the voters.
But first, Romanians will head to the polls this Sunday once more to vote in parliamentary elections. The Social Democrats have so far led in the polls, with the far-right AUR, Georgescu's ex-party, coming in second. But with so many candidates from mainstream political parties underperforming in the first round of presidential elections, polls missing the mark by a long shot, and Georgescu's potential 23% of support up for grabs, the possibility of another upset in the upcoming general elections cannot be ruled out.
The Georgian parliament convened today for its first session since the election. The opposition refused to participate, calling the assembly illegitimate. The only party that attended the session was pro-Russian ruling party, Georgian Dream. Meanwhile, protesters have set up a camp outside parliament in Tbilisi in an attempt to block members of the Georgian Dream from entering the building. Ovidiusz Nicea reports.
Protesters chanted "Russian slaves" and threw eggs at the parliament as it convened for the first session. Opposition MPs left their seats in the parliament empty in protest against what they call stolen elections.
Georgia just went through a coup d'etat, and I say this with full responsibility of the term.
The parliamentary election in Georgia took place on October 26 amid allegations of widespread fraud. International observers have confirmed instances of ballot stuffing, voter intimidation, violence near polling stations, and bribery on the election day. The European Union and the United States have called on Georgian authorities to investigate the allegations of irregularities. Russia, China, and Hungary are among the countries that have congratulated the Georgian dream on its election victory. The opposition has protested the official results of the vote in many different ways, including splashing paint on the face of the chairman of Central Electoral Committee. The Georgian president, once an ally of the ruling party, has rejected the results of the vote and, together with the opposition, has filed a lawsuit to the Constitutional Court.
This parliament has no legitimacy to gather itself, to start these sessions, because this is questioned, their existence is questioned into the Constitutional Court of Georgia. That is really demolishing, tearing up the Constitution of Georgia. They must wait the Constitutional Court to make decision.
Georgian dream slaves are killing our constitution and making a mockery of our parliament.
The opposition says that the situation in Georgia is about to deteriorate as the ruling Georgian dream, founded by oligarch billionaire Bidzina Ivanishvili, tightens its grip on power.
My party has had hundreds of its members arrested or violently assaulted over the last few months, and the same goes for other opposition parties. We can expect to see more of that. Then we can also expect an economic crisis to set in, because we're going to see a lot of international sanctions.
Recent polls show over 80% of the country's population in favor of joining the European Union. And the EU has already put the Georgian accession process on ice. Brussels has told Georgia that it will not be able to recommend opening European Union membership talks unless Tbilisi changes its course.
Farmers across Poland took to the streets over the weekend, voicing their strong opposition to the proposed EU Mercosur trade agreement. Their protests reflect a growing wave of discontent amongst European farmers, with counterparts in France and Germany expressing similar concerns about the deal's potential impact on local agriculture. Alexandra Marhevich has this next report.
Well, despite the biting cold and falling snow, Polish farmers have taken to the streets, marching through towns to protest against the EU Mercosur agreement. Their message was clear: the proposed trade deal threatens their livelihoods.
On December 19th or 20th, an agreement with Mercosur is to be signed. For the past 30 or even 40 years, the Amazon has been heavily deforested, and while some pesticides and herbicides are banned in the European Union, they are widely used there. Now, the EU plans to allow the import of such food, which will inevitably lead to the collapse of European agriculture.
This discontent is not isolated to Poland. Farmers in France and Germany have also staged protests, signaling a Europe-wide apprehension over the EU-Mercosur deal. In recent weeks, French farmers blocked access to the port of Bordeaux, expressing their frustration and demanding that their government oppose the deal. German farmers have organized similar demonstrations, highlighting widespread opposition among their agricultural community. Outgoing European Commissioner for Agriculture Janusz Wojciechowski spoke exclusively to Business Arena about these concerns.
Consequence of this agreement is potential increase of import from Mercosur countries valued about €2 billion. But in this destabilized market, it could be the problem for the farmers, and we should to hear the farmers and to take into account their voice.
The EU-Mercosur agreement aims to create a free trade zone between the European Union and 5 South American countries: Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Bolivia. And while supporters argue that it'll open new markets and opportunities, farmers across Europe are worried about unfair competition due to differences in production costs and standards.
In the early hours of Monday morning, a DHL cargo plane unexpectedly fell short of the runway while on its approach to the Vilnius airport. One crew member was killed, 3, including the pilot, were injured. Now investigators are seeking answers as to why the plane crashed. The plane originated in Leipzig, Germany. In July, several fires broke out in warehouses there and in Birmingham, UK, from incendiary devices placed in parcels slated to be delivered by DHL. The Wall Street Journal reports that Western officials believe this was Russian sabotage intended to ignite fires on cargo planes bound for the U.S. and Canada. And now joining me to discuss this latest incident is former Lithuanian Deputy Foreign Minister Darius Jurgelevičius. Hello, sir. I hope I got your name correct, but thank you for joining us on TVP World tonight.
Very good evening.
So first of all, I'd like to just ask or state what could be the obvious. Is this a coincidence? We've just seen 2 Chinese ships damage underwater communications cables in the Baltic Sea on 2 separate occasions. Now this incident where investigators are still looking into the DHL fires in Leipzig and in the UK, but have yet to release their findings. What is the likelihood that this is a Russian attack?
You know, it's easy these days to speculate and always blame Russia for all these kind of things and tricks they're doing. But I want just to add one very peculiar detail about that Chinese ship that has been accused of damaging cables in Baltic Sea connecting Lithuania and Sweden. I don't know whether you have heard that the fact that the captain of that Chinese ship is a Russian citizen. So that is very important and kind of detail that could suggest a little bit more than just a Chinese ship itself. So when it comes to this very tragic accident that happened this morning in Vilnius, I guess you just rightly mentioned that there was an article in the Wall Street Journal earlier this month about those GRU plots to inside the planes bound to US and Canada. So surprisingly, this plane that was a DHL carrier also originated from Leipzig. And as at this moment, there's all kind of possible scenarios are on the table, including sabotage and terrorist act. Although our institutions left doors open for further communication and investigation, as this is the very initial stage of investigation of this accident.
Apparently, this 34-year-old Lithuanian pilot survived unscathed. I guess we still don't know what he's saying, what he's telling investigators. What is your estimate on when we're going to know some concrete information as to what is likely thought as to be the cause?
You know, there's taking into account that this is very kind of burning issue, and there's a very world attention is also on this matter. I guess our competent authorities will try to give more information as soon as it's going to be available. Actually, taking into account that certain information should be kept confident till the end of investigation. But it was reported that our law enforcement visited those 3 members of the crew in the hospital. One of them, the one Lithuanian national, is in a best condition. They've been asked just to provide a bit more of details. It was not a formal any legal act. And interesting fact, he said that at the time when the plane crashed, he was not in the cockpit, but inside the plane, and he saw any flame, nothing that could really cause this tragic event to happen.
Interesting, interesting. Well, now I'd like to put up a post on X by the Foreign Minister of Lithuania, Gabrielius Landsbergis, concerning these hybrid attacks. Let's take a look, see if we can put that up on the screen.
Why do we call it hybrid warfare? Because if we called it terrorism, then we would have to do something about it.
Now, he also gave an interview to another TV station. This is about a month ago. A very interesting statement by the Lithuanian foreign minister saying that we are not calling a spade, but we're calling them hybrid attacks. if we look at all the incidences of fires and different things that have happened throughout Europe in multiple countries at this point, do you believe that Minister Landesbergis has a point, and that perhaps we need to change our approach as these incidents continue to mount?
I guess it's time for us really just to wake up. So it's been already 2 years since the beginning of war in Ukraine, although there was the first sign that we should really reconsider our security policies and approach towards Russia. It was 2014 when Russia occupied and annexed Crimea. So I guess these things like Minister Landsberg is referring to are becoming more and more kind of common. And it's a kind of thing that Russia trying and testing our reaction, and taking into account that these things are not going to disappear without a trace, and Russia is going to use them more and more. I guess it's time for us just seriously to consider how should we really to address them. And in my opinion, it's time for us to start doing same things to them, as we see there's no any other way. How can we really cope with this threat that comes from Russia? We have to retaliate, let me put it this way, very bluntly.
Well, do you think that maybe perhaps because, the death toll is only one, 3 others are injured, and then you had a really close call with a building that the plane was about to hit or could have hit, but I guess was damaged by subsequent parts of the plane breaking apart. Had there been more victims, maybe would this be seen a little differently? Or are we just still waiting to at least know all the details?
You know, actually, thank God, no any more casualties resulted in that tragic event. So the building, the house, had 13 people, 2 of them children, and it happened that they managed to escape from burning house through window. Some of them really being almost naked, but they are intact. Only one of them really asked for some medical treatment, but 12 of them in a good shape. Actually, the saddest part is that the house that was hit by flame, and there's no longer fits for living. So there's another thing which is going to be an issue for our authorities, how really just to compensate and where to put those people where to live.
And finally, since we know that these DHL cargo planes were targeted, at least according to those reports by the Wall Street Journal, is this potentially maybe a wake-up call for Europe to start paying attention more to its cargo freight and these types of airplanes that could be a target for Moscow?
I guess it's time for us to consider in a much more broader way what's going on with Russia. And cargo planes is just one of those tools that Russia uses against NATO countries. And it's just one small piece of that kind of hybrid war that Russia waged against NATO. So it's a wake-up call, as I mentioned to you. We should have heard it in 2014. But I guess even now, it's not late for us really just to start to consider how should we really cope with this threat and what kind of means we should really take, just in a way how to retaliate Russia for all these actions.
Well, and how should we respond? We've got just about a minute left, but in your opinion, how should we respond to something like this if it is proved that Moscow is behind this?
First of all, let's establish the fact that Moscow is behind, which is likely to be the case. So I guess we have finally to realize that we cannot make any more statements whether we are really seriously concerned. We really want to see positive signs coming from Russia. We need to take actions, and I guess politicians know how to do it. I just a little bit sort of sad to understand that they are somehow thinking that they may still delay to take serious actions against Russia.
Okay, Darius Jurgelevičius, Former
Thank you,
Deputy
it's okay.
Lithuanian Foreign Minister. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate
pleasure.
your insight.
Thank you so much.
And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time. Good night.